My beloved child, I need you to hear me with an open heart right now. You have carried more than most people around you will ever fully understand, and for far too long, you believed you had to carry it quietly. You learned how to smile when your heart was tired, how to answer, "I'm fine," when everything inside you felt unsettled, and how to keep moving when all you wanted was to stop and rest. You became the person others depended on. You showed up when people needed encouragement. You listened when others were hurting. You solved problems, carried responsibilities, protected the people you loved, and continued fulfilling your obligations even as your own strength began to disappear. From the outside, you may have looked steady, capable, and composed, but I have always seen what existed beneath that appearance. I saw the moments when you walked into a quiet room and suddenly felt the weight of everything you had been holding back. I saw the nights when your body was exhausted, but your mind refused to become still. I saw you stare into the darkness as one thought led to another until worry became fear, and fear became a heaviness you could barely explain. I heard the questions you never spoke aloud. I heard the prayers that began with confidence and ended in silence because you no longer knew what words to use. I heard the sighs that carried more meaning than sentences ever could. I saw you wake up already tired, not because you had not slept, but because your soul had been carrying battles that sleep alone could not resolve. You wondered whether anyone truly understood how difficult it had become to keep being strong. You wondered whether anyone noticed how much effort it took simply to continue doing what everyone expected of you. And sometimes, my child, you wondered whether I noticed. You looked at your circumstances and asked yourself why I seemed quiet when your heart was crying so loudly. You questioned whether your pain had somehow become invisible to heaven. But listen carefully to me. You have never been invisible to me, not for one moment. I have seen every part of this journey, including the parts no one else witnessed. I saw the tears you quickly wiped away before someone entered the room. I saw the moments in the car when you sat alone for a few extra minutes because you needed time to gather yourself before facing another responsibility. I saw the tears that came in the shower because it was one of the few places where you felt safe enough to let them fall. I saw you sit quietly among other people while feeling completely alone inside. I saw the disappointment you hid because you did not want anyone to think you were ungrateful. I saw the fear you concealed because you believed everyone needed you to remain confident. I saw the anger you swallowed because you were afraid that expressing it would make things worse. I saw how many times you chose silence simply because you did not have the strength to explain what was happening inside you. Nothing escaped my attention. There were moments when you felt as though you were drowning in plain sight, wondering how people could look directly at you and still fail to recognize how much you were struggling. But I recognized it. I saw the light in your eyes begin to dim when disappointment lasted longer than you expected. I noticed when you started withdrawing because conversation required energy you no longer had. I noticed when the things that once brought you joy began to feel distant. I noticed when your laughter became something you offered to other people rather than something you genuinely felt. I noticed the tension you carried in your body, the heaviness in your chest, the racing thoughts, and the quiet fear that something else might go wrong. I noticed every time you told yourself to keep going, because you believed stopping was not an option. You have spent so much time being strong for everyone else that you almost forgot what it feels like to be held yourself. You became accustomed to carrying the emotional weight of rooms, relationships, responsibilities, and expectations. When someone else was hurting, you tried to help. When a problem appeared, you searched for a solution. When your family needed stability, you tried to provide it. When your work demanded more, you gave more. When someone disappointed you, you often absorbed the pain and kept moving because you did not want another conflict to manage. Yet every burden you carried left something behind. Piece by piece, the weight accumulated until you found yourself exhausted in ways you could not easily describe. There were days when nothing dramatic happened, yet you still felt as though you had fought a war. There were mornings when getting out of bed required more courage than anyone knew. There were evenings when you wanted to explain what you were feeling but did not know where to begin. My child, I saw those moments. I was not watching you from a distance with disappointment. I was near you with compassion. I was not waiting for you to become stronger before I came close. I was already close when you felt weak. I was not demanding that you hide your confusion, suppress your tears, or pretend that everything made sense. I have never needed your performance. I have never needed the polished version of you that you show when you are afraid your real emotions might be too much for someone else. I want you to understand that you do not have to wear that mask with me. You do not have to organize your thoughts perfectly before you speak to me. You do not have to turn your pain into beautiful words. You do not have to explain every emotion correctly. You can come to me tired. You can come confused. You can come with questions you are afraid to ask. You can come with tears, silence, frustration, disappointment, and uncertainty. I already know what is there, and I am not turning away. There are wounds within you that you rarely discuss because opening them feels dangerous. There are memories that still affect you, even though you tell yourself they happened a long time ago. There are disappointments you have tried to minimize because you think you should be over them by now. There are words people spoke that still return to your mind when you are alone. There are moments of rejection that change the way you see yourself. There are losses you learned to live around but never truly stopped grieving. There are fears you rarely admit because saying them aloud would make them feel too real. I know all of it. I know the complete story behind every expression you hide. I know what happened before the tears began. I know why certain situations make your heart race. I know why some conversations leave you drained. I know why certain memories still hurt. I know why you sometimes pull away even from people you love. I know why you become quiet when you are overwhelmed. I know what you are trying so hard not to feel. And I am asking you now to stop believing that you must hide those things from me. You have spent enough time protecting everyone else from the truth of how deeply you have been affected. In my presence, you do not need to protect anyone. You do not need to prove that you can handle everything. You do not need to convince me that you are stronger than you feel. Let yourself be seen. Let the armor become unnecessary for a moment. Let the tears come if they need to come. Let your breathing slow. Let your heart admit what it has been afraid to admit. You are tired. You have been hurt. You have been carrying too much, and you need somewhere safe to place it. I am that safe place. I am not embarrassed by your weakness. I am not impatient with your questions. I am not frustrated by your exhaustion. I am not disappointed because you reached a point where you could no longer carry everything alone. I have been waiting for you to understand that you were never meant to hide from me. Look toward me now, my child. You do not have to solve your entire life in this moment. You do not have to understand what comes next. You do not have to force yourself into courage before you are ready. For now, simply allow this truth to reach the deepest part of you. I see you. I see the pain you never explained. I see the strength it took to survive days that nobody else knew were difficult. I see every silent battle, every hidden tear, every exhausted prayer, and every moment when you nearly gave up but somehow kept moving. I see the person behind the smile, behind the responsibility, behind the strength, behind the carefully constructed words. I see you exactly as you are in this moment, and I am not looking away. You have never been overlooked by me. You have never cried a tear I did not notice. You have never whispered a prayer I did not hear. You have never walked through a dark night without my attention resting upon you. So for this moment, stop running, stop pretending, stop carrying the pressure of appearing unbreakable, and simply let yourself be known. You are here with me, and I am closer than you have allowed yourself to believe. Now that you have allowed yourself to be seen, I want you to hear something that must settle deeper than every accusation you have carried against yourself. Your pain is not your identity, your mistakes are not your name, and the rejection you experience does not determine your worth. For too long, you have looked at yourself through the eyes of people who did not know how to love you well. You have measured your value by who stayed, who left, who chose you, who ignored you, who praised you, and who disappointed you. You have allowed careless words, painful betrayals, and moments of failure to become permanent definitions in your mind. Somewhere along the way, you began to believe that because someone treated you as though you were unimportant, you must actually be unimportant. Because someone walked away, you assumed you were difficult to love. Because you made mistakes, you concluded that you had ruined something beyond repair. Because you struggled in areas where others seemed strong, you began to think there was something fundamentally wrong with you. But my child, those conclusions did not come from me. I never called you worthless. I never called you a burden. I never told you that your worst moment was the truest thing about you. I never said that your failures had the authority to erase everything I placed within you. I never looked at your broken places and decided that you were beyond restoration. Those were conclusions formed in pain, fear, disappointment, and shame, and I am asking you to release them. You have carried shame like a heavy garment, wrapping it around yourself so tightly that you forgot what it felt like to breathe freely. You replayed old moments in your mind and punished yourself long after the moment had passed. You remembered what you should have said, what you should not have done, where you should have been wiser, where you should have recognized the warning signs, where you should have walked away sooner, and where you should have been stronger. You have judged the person you were with, the understanding you possess now, and then condemned yourself for not knowing then what life had not yet taught you. I have seen you revisit those moments again and again, searching for a different ending in a story that cannot be rewritten by regret. But I am not asking you to spend the rest of your life standing in the courtroom of your past, constantly placing yourself on trial. I am calling you out of that room. I am not denying that mistakes were made. I am not pretending that certain choices had no consequences. I am telling you that failure is an event, not an identity. A wrong decision does not make you permanently wrong. A season of weakness does not make you permanently weak. A broken relationship does not prove that you are incapable of being loved. A closed door does not mean you are rejected by heaven. A painful chapter does not erase the worth I placed within you before anyone else had an opinion about your life. You have spent too much time asking whether you are enough for people who were never qualified to define you. You changed yourself to keep the peace. You made yourself smaller to avoid making others uncomfortable. You gave more than you had because you hoped generosity would make people stay. You overlooked disrespect because losing the relationship frightened you more than losing pieces of yourself. You accepted less than you needed because you feared that asking for more would make you seem difficult. You learned how to read the emotions of everyone around you while ignoring your own. You became skilled at adapting, pleasing, explaining, forgiving, and trying again. Yet deep inside, you kept wondering why none of that effort could silence the feeling that you were still not enough. My beloved, you cannot build a secure identity on unstable human approval. People change. Their moods change. Their expectations change. Their ability to see you clearly changes. Some people will value you only when you are useful to them. Some will celebrate you until your growth challenges their comfort. Some will misunderstand your heart no matter how carefully you explain it. Some will leave for reasons that have more to do with their own wounds than with your worth. If you make their acceptance the foundation of your identity, you will spend your life rebuilding yourself every time someone changes their mind about you. I do not want you living that way. My love for you is not fragile. It does not increase when you perform well and decrease when you struggle. It does not depend on how impressive you appear, how much you accomplish, how perfectly you behave, or how consistently you feel strong. I am not waiting for some future version of you before I decide that you are worthy of love. I am not looking past who you are today toward a more polished version I might prefer tomorrow. I know you now. I know every contradiction, every insecurity, every fear, every place where your faith is steady and every place where it trembles. I know the thoughts you wish you had never thought, the words you wish you could take back, the moments you wish you could erase, and the parts of your story you would rather keep hidden. And knowing all of it, I have not withdrawn my love from you. You have imagined that if you could finally become disciplined enough, spiritual enough, successful enough, calm enough, confident enough, or healed enough, then perhaps you would deserve peace. But my love is not a reward you earn after repairing yourself. You do not have to clean every wound before you come close to me. You do not have to prove that you have learned every lesson. You do not have to reach a place of emotional perfection before you can receive compassion. I meet you in the unfinished places. I meet you while questions remain unanswered. I meet you while some parts of your heart are still tender. I meet you while you are still learning how to trust again. I meet you before everything is resolved, because my love is not based on the condition of your circumstances. It flows from who I am. You may look at your scars and see evidence that something is wrong with you, but I see evidence that you survived what tried to break you. You may look at the years behind you and see wasted time, but I do not reduce your life to what went wrong. You may look at your weaknesses and feel embarrassed by them, but weakness does not make you unwanted. You may look at yourself beside someone else and feel behind, overlooked, or less successful, but comparison cannot reveal your true worth. Your life was never meant to be measured by another person's timeline. You do not need to become someone else in order to become valuable. You already possess a worth that human approval cannot create and human rejection cannot destroy. I want you to begin separating your identity from everything that happened to you. You experienced rejection, but you are not rejected. You experienced betrayal, but you are not disposable. You experienced failure, but you are not a failure. You experienced seasons of confusion, but you are not hopeless. You experienced weakness, but weakness is not the whole truth about you. You have been wounded, but you are more than your wounds. You have regrets, but you are more than your regrets. You have scars, but scars are not chains unless you continue allowing them to define what you believe is possible for your life. My child, the voices that spoke against you do not carry the final word. The people who underestimated you do not hold authority over your future. The person who could not recognize your value did not remove that value by failing to see it. The relationship that ended did not erase your ability to love or be loved. The opportunity that passed you by did not prove that your purpose disappeared. And the mistake you still remember in the middle of the night did not cause me to turn my face away from you. Stop giving permanent authority to temporary moments. Stop allowing yesterday's pain to introduce you every morning. Stop repeating accusations against yourself that I am not speaking over you. You are not required to live the rest of your life apologizing for being imperfect. You are not required to prove your worth through exhaustion. You are not required to earn love by becoming indispensable. You are not required to remain in places that diminish you simply because leaving would make someone uncomfortable. Begin to believe that you can be loved without performing, accepted without pretending, and known without hiding. This is where something inside you begins to change. Not because every external circumstance has changed yet, but because the voice defining you is changing. You are learning to stop asking your past who you are. You are learning to stop asking rejection who you are. You are learning to stop asking failure who you are. You are learning to listen to me, and I am telling you now, you are seen, you are loved, you are not disqualified, and your life is not reduced to the hardest things you have lived through. Let that truth become stronger than shame. Let it become louder than rejection. Let it become more believable than every lie you accepted while you were hurting. You do not have to carry those names anymore. You are not who pain told you that you were. You are not who fear told you that you would always be. You are mine, and nothing in your past has the power to change that. There were seasons when you looked toward heaven and wondered why I seemed silent. You prayed with sincerity, waited with expectation, and believed that surely the answer would come quickly. Yet days became weeks, weeks became months, and in some cases, months became years. You watched other people move forward while you remained in a place that felt painfully unchanged. You saw doors open for others while yours stayed closed. You watched prayers appear to be answered around you, while the one request closest to your heart remained unresolved. There were moments when you asked, "How much longer must I wait? How much longer must I carry this? When will something finally change?" And because you could not see what I was doing, you sometimes assumed I was doing nothing. But my child, silence was never absence. Delay was never abandonment. What looked empty from your perspective was often filled with work you could not yet see. While you were waiting for circumstances to change, I was strengthening something within you that needed to become deeper before the next season could arrive. You wanted an answer, but I was also building endurance. You wanted an open door, but I was developing discernment. You wanted immediate relief, but I was teaching your heart how to remain steady when certainty was unavailable. You wanted the storm to end, but there were things you could only learn by discovering that you could survive while the wind was still blowing. I know that does not make every painful moment easy. I know there were nights when the waiting felt unbearable. I know there were seasons when financial pressure made the future frightening, when relationships disappointed you, when rejection made you question your value, when loneliness became heavier than you wanted to admit, and when uncertainty exhausted your mind. I know there were moments when you interpreted hardship as punishment and silence as proof that you had somehow been forgotten. But I need you to see your past differently now. Some of the things you called delays were preparation. Some of the closed doors you mourned were protection. Some of the seasons that seemed barren were quietly developing roots beneath the surface. A tree does not survive a violent storm because its branches look impressive. It survives because its roots have gone deep enough to hold when the wind begins to pull. In the same way, there were things I was establishing within you where nobody could see them. Patience was growing beneath frustration. Wisdom was growing beneath disappointment. Discernment was growing beneath betrayal. Compassion was growing beneath heartbreak. Courage was growing beneath fear. Strength was being formed beneath exhaustion. You did not always feel stronger because growth rarely announces itself while it is happening. Often, you recognized it only later, when you faced something that once would have destroyed you and discovered that you could now stand differently. My child, think about what you have already survived. There were moments when you were convinced you could not take another step, yet somehow you did. There were circumstances you believed would permanently destroy your peace, yet you eventually learned how to breathe again. There were losses you thought would leave nothing behind but emptiness, yet even in the emptiness, you began discovering parts of yourself that had been buried beneath dependence, fear, or expectation. There were disappointments that stripped away illusions and forced you to see people, situations, and even yourself more clearly. None of this means that pain was good simply because growth eventually came from it. It means that pain did not have the final authority over what it produced in you. What tried to weaken you became a place where endurance could be formed. What tried to make you bitter became an opportunity to become wiser without losing compassion. What tried to convince you that your life was over became evidence that you could continue even when you did not understand how. You often thought you were being buried, but there were seasons when you were actually being planted. A seed beneath the soil cannot see the sunlight. It cannot measure its progress by what is visible above the ground. Everything around it appears dark, confined, and silent. Yet life is developing where nobody can see. Roots begin before fruit appears. Growth begins before evidence appears. And much of what I have been doing in you has happened in that hidden place. You wanted visible confirmation, but I was forming invisible strength. You wanted immediate movement, but I was teaching you stability. You wanted the destination, but I was preparing your character to survive once you reached it. There were blessings you asked for that would have required more wisdom than you possessed at the time. There were responsibilities you desired that would have become burdens without stronger boundaries. There were opportunities you wanted that could have overwhelmed you if they had arrived before you learned how to remain grounded. Preparation is not rejection, my child. Sometimes love does not give immediately because love sees beyond the moment. You saw what you wanted. I also saw what it would require from you. You saw the door. I saw what was waiting on the other side. You saw the opportunity. I saw whether your heart was prepared to carry it without losing itself. And so, there were moments when waiting became part of the answer. I was not wasting your time. I was using time to deepen you. The fire you walked through also revealed what could not remain hidden. Pressure exposed fears you needed to acknowledge. Disappointment revealed where you had placed too much confidence in people. Delay revealed how tightly you wanted to control outcomes. Loneliness revealed where you had depended upon outside affirmation to feel secure. Difficulty brought things to the surface, not so that you could be condemned, but so that you could finally see what was shaping your reactions. Refinement is uncomfortable because it separates what is essential from what can no longer support where you are going. Gold does not recognize the purpose of the furnace while it feels the heat, but the fire exposes what does not belong. In the same way, difficult seasons have shown you what fear was controlling, what patterns were draining you, what expectations were unrealistic, and what beliefs were too weak to sustain you. You are not the same person who entered those seasons. Even if you still feel tired, you have learned things that comfort alone could never have taught you. You know more about perseverance. You know more about what matters. You know more about who truly stands beside you. You know more about the difference between temporary emotion and lasting truth. You know that you can live through uncertainty without having every answer. You know that tears do not mean weakness, and that questions do not mean you have lost your faith. You have been stretched, tested, corrected, and strengthened in ways you did not recognize while they were happening. So do not look back at every waiting season and call it wasted. Do not assume that nothing meaningful happened simply because the outcome did not arrive on your preferred timetable. There were roots growing beneath those quiet days. There was endurance being built during those long nights. There was wisdom forming in the places where disappointment forced you to slow down and see clearly. There was a deeper strength developing every time you chose to continue without knowing when the answer would come. My beloved child, the silence did not mean I had forgotten your name. The delay did not mean your prayers disappeared. The darkness did not mean the story had ended. You were being prepared in ways you could not yet measure. And now, as you look back, I want you to stop seeing yourself only as someone who survived a difficult season. See yourself as someone who was formed within it. You entered with one kind of strength, and you are emerging with another. You entered wanting certainty, but you are learning trust. You entered wanting immediate answers, but you are gaining wisdom. You entered afraid that the waiting would destroy you, but the waiting has revealed that you are capable of standing longer, seeing deeper, and carrying more than you once believed. Nothing about those hidden seasons was meaningless. They were preparing your heart for what comes next. My beloved child, now that you understand the season behind you was not empty, I need you to understand something equally important about the season ahead. What you have been praying for may require changes you did not expect. You have asked me for peace, healing, stability, clarity, restoration, and freedom. But sometimes the answer to those prayers cannot enter while everything around you remains exactly as it has always been. There are structures in your life that were built during seasons of fear, survival, disappointment, and uncertainty. There are habits you developed because they once helped you feel safe. There are relationships you held on to because losing them seemed more frightening than continuing to be drained by them. There are routines that became familiar even though they no longer strengthen you. There are ways of thinking that once protected you from disappointment but now prevent you from moving freely. And there are places where you have tried to maintain control because uncertainty feels dangerous. My child, I am not asking you to condemn yourself for any of this. I am asking you to become willing to release what can no longer travel with you. This is where surrender becomes more than a word. It is easy to say that you trust me when the path is familiar and everything remains predictable. It is different when trust requires you to loosen your grip on something you have depended upon for years. You may have prayed for a new beginning while secretly hoping I would give you a new future without disturbing anything in your present. But some changes cannot happen that way. Sometimes what you call disruption is the beginning of alignment. Sometimes what feels like loss is protection. Sometimes what feels like being pushed out of a comfortable place is actually an invitation to stop settling for what has already become too small for the person you are becoming. I know change can hurt. I know that even unhealthy patterns can feel safe simply because they are familiar. I know you can miss people who were not good for your spirit. I know you can grieve a door that needed to close. I know you can feel confused when something you expected to last suddenly begins to fall apart. That is why I am asking you not to judge every transition by how it feels in its first moments. Pruning rarely feels like growth while the branch is being cut. Surgery rarely feels like healing while the wound is still tender. An old structure being dismantled can look like destruction before a stronger foundation becomes visible. Do not assume that discomfort means you are moving in the wrong direction. There are relationships in your life that may need to change because you have spent too much energy trying to maintain connections that repeatedly leave you empty. You cannot continue giving unlimited access to people who continually disturb the peace you are learning to protect. You cannot keep interpreting every departure as proof that you failed. Some people were connected to an earlier season of your life, and their role may not continue in the same way forever. This does not require bitterness. It does not require revenge. It does not require you to hate anyone. It simply requires enough honesty to recognize when a relationship is built on fear, dependence, manipulation, constant conflict, or the expectation that you must abandon yourself to keep someone else comfortable. Letting go does not always mean that someone is evil. Sometimes it simply means the connection no longer belongs in the same place it once occupied. I am also asking you to examine your habits of control. You have tried to predict every outcome because uncertainty exhausted you. You have rehearsed conversations before they happened, imagined every possible problem, and carried responsibilities that were never fully yours because you believed that if you could manage enough details, you could prevent pain. But control has not given you the peace you hoped it would provide. It has often made you more tired. You cannot prepare for every possibility. You cannot force every person to understand you. You cannot guarantee that every door will remain open. You cannot carry everyone's choices on your shoulders. There comes a point when faith requires you to do what you can and release what you cannot control. Surrender does not mean becoming careless. It does not mean refusing responsibility or waiting passively for life to happen. It means recognizing the boundary between what has been placed in your hands and what never belonged there. Make the decision you know is right, but release the need to control how everyone responds. Speak truthfully, but release the need to control whether everyone understands. Love people sincerely, but release the belief that your love must rescue them from every consequence. Prepare wisely, but release the illusion that enough preparation can remove all uncertainty. My child, you have exhausted yourself trying to hold together things that require more than your hands. Put down what you were never meant to carry. There may also be routines that must change. You have asked for a different life while repeating patterns that keep producing the same exhaustion. Some habits are not dramatic enough to seem dangerous, yet they quietly consume your time, attention, peace, and strength. You may need to become more protective of what enters your mind. You may need to stop returning to environments that repeatedly reopen old wounds. You may need to say no where you once automatically said yes. You may need to leave space in your life instead of filling every moment because stillness makes you uncomfortable. You may need to stop chasing immediate relief and begin choosing what creates lasting peace. These changes may feel unfamiliar because you have practiced the old patterns for so long that they seem like part of your identity. But familiarity is not the same as freedom. I am teaching you that you can choose differently, and when something begins to leave, do not immediately run after it simply because its absence makes you uncomfortable. There were times in your past when you returned to situations that had already shown you their limits because loneliness made the familiar seem better than the unknown. This time, pause. Ask whether you are being pulled backward by love or merely by fear. Ask whether you truly need what you are chasing or whether you are simply afraid of the empty space it left behind. Empty space is not always a problem to solve. Sometimes it is the room where something healthier can eventually grow. You do not need to fill every silence immediately. You do not need to replace every relationship the moment it changes. You do not need to force the next chapter open before the previous one has fully closed. Allow transition to do its work, my beloved child. I know part of you wants guarantees before you let go. You want to know exactly what will replace what you release. You want to see the entire road before taking the first unfamiliar step, but that is not how surrender works. Surrender says, I do not understand everything, but I will no longer let fear make every decision for me. Surrender says, I will stop gripping what is hurting me simply because I know it. Surrender says, I will trust that losing what no longer belongs does not mean losing everything. You have spent long enough trying to keep an old life intact while asking for a new one. Now I am asking you to open your hands. Let what needs to end, end. Let what needs to change, change. Let what needs to be released, leave without forcing it back into place. The transition may feel uncertain, and at times it may even feel painful. But do not confuse the breaking of an old pattern with the breaking of your life. You are learning to loosen your grip, to trust beyond what you can see, and to make room for what cannot arrive while your hands are still full of what you were meant to release. After everything you have walked through, I need you to lift your eyes beyond the season that has wounded you and begin to understand that your story is not over. The chapter that brought you sorrow is not the final chapter. The years that felt quiet, delayed, confusing, or painfully empty have not erased what I placed within you. You have spent so much time looking at what was lost that you have sometimes forgotten to consider what can still be restored. You have looked at doors that closed and assumed there were no others ahead. You have looked at relationships that ended and wondered whether meaningful connection was still possible. You have looked at dreams that seemed to die and concluded that their season had passed forever. But my child, do not place a final period where I have only allowed a pause. There are still pages of your life you have not lived, conversations you have not had, people you have not met, opportunities you have not seen, and parts of your purpose you have not yet discovered. The past may explain where you have been, but it does not possess the authority to decide where you must remain. I am not asking you to deny what happened. I am asking you to stop believing that what happened is the only thing that can happen. There is more ahead than what you can see from where you are standing today. You have lived for so long in survival mode that hope may feel unfamiliar. When someone has spent years expecting disappointment, peace can feel suspicious. When someone has repeatedly experienced closed doors, they can become afraid to approach new ones. When a dream has been buried for a long time, even the possibility of its return can feel dangerous because hope makes the heart vulnerable again. I understand this. I know why part of you hesitates to believe that something good could still unfold. You have protected yourself by keeping expectations low. You told yourself that if you expected little, disappointment would hurt less. But I do not want the pain of yesterday to become the architect of tomorrow. You were not created merely to endure one difficult chapter after another. There is still life within you that has not been fully expressed. There are gifts that hardship did not destroy, There are ideas that disappointment did not erase. There is compassion within you that pain actually deepened. There is wisdom in you that did not exist before the years of testing. There is courage in you that was developed quietly every time you kept going when giving up would have been easier. And all of these things can become part of what comes next. Restoration does not always mean returning everything to exactly the way it was before. Sometimes restoration is greater than replacement because it gives you something healthier than what you lost. You may not receive the exact relationship you once imagined, but you can learn what mutual respect and genuine peace feel like. You may not return to the exact opportunity that closed, but another path can open that fits the person you have become more completely. You may not recover every year you believe was wasted, but you can carry the wisdom of those years into choices that make the years ahead more meaningful. I am not limited to recreating the past. I can bring new life from places you thought were finished. I can awaken desires you had buried because disappointment convinced you they were unrealistic. I can show you abilities that remained hidden because survival demanded all your attention. I can connect you with people who recognize what others overlooked. I can place you in circumstances where the lessons you learned in private suddenly become valuable to someone else. My child, your scars are not merely reminders of what hurt you. They can become evidence that healing is possible. The pain you once thought had no meaning can become the place from which you speak with compassion to someone who is standing where you once stood. There are people who will not need a perfect person to encourage them. They will need someone who knows what it means to survive disappointment without losing the capacity to care. They will need someone who understands what waiting feels like, what rejection feels like, and what rebuilding feels like. Your life can speak to them in ways that theory never could. This is part of purpose. Not pretending that nothing happened, but allowing what happened to become wisdom rather than a prison. There are also dreams within you that you stopped mentioning because you became embarrassed to hope for them. You may have convinced yourself that you were too late, too tired, too old, too inexperienced, or too far behind. But purpose is not controlled by the timeline you imagined years ago. You are not disqualified because your path has been different. Some things could only be carried responsibly after you became the person you are now. Some opportunities require the discernment you gained through disappointment. Some relationships require the boundaries you learned through pain. Some responsibilities require the humility that only difficulty could teach. What appears late to you may still arrive at the right moment for who you have become. Do not underestimate what can begin after a long season of stillness. You have not discovered every gift inside you. There are abilities you have not yet had the environment to use. There are ideas that will come alive when fear stops taking up so much space. There are connections that can change the direction of your life, not because they rescue you, but because they recognize something in you that is ready to grow. There are opportunities that human effort alone could never force open. When they come, you will understand why certain earlier doors could not remain. You will understand why some paths had to end, and why some relationships could not follow you into every season. Not every loss will make sense immediately, but the future can reveal things the present cannot explain. And I want you to think beyond yourself. The healing taking place within you can affect the people who come after you. Patterns that have moved through families for years do not have to continue unchanged. Fear does not have to become the inheritance of your children. Bitterness does not have to become the language of your home. Constant financial chaos, emotional instability, silence, shame, and unhealthy patterns do not have to pass untouched from one generation to another. When you choose a healthier way of living, loving, speaking, forgiving, and responding, you begin changing more than your own experience. You create a different example for those watching you. You show them that pain can be acknowledged without becoming an identity, that boundaries can exist without hatred, that strength can include tenderness, and that faith can survive unanswered questions. This is why your life has more significance than you sometimes realize. My beloved child, There is a future beyond the version of your story you have already memorized. There is still room for joy that does not require pretending, peace that is not dependent on perfect circumstances, relationships that do not demand that you disappear, and work that carries meaning beyond simple survival. There is still room for renewed vision. There is still room for purpose. There is still room for the parts of you that went quiet during the hardest years to become alive again. Do not call yourself finished because one season exhausted you. Do not call a dream dead simply because it remained buried longer than you expected. Do not assume that the best part of your story must exist behind you. You are standing at the edge of a new season, with more wisdom than you had before, more discernment than you had before, and a deeper understanding of what truly matters. What comes next will not erase where you have been, but it can transform the meaning of where you have been. The ashes do not have to be the ending. There is still life ahead, still purpose unfolding, still beauty capable of rising from what you once believed was permanently lost. You have heard me speak to the hidden pain you carried, the shame that tried to define you, the long seasons that tested you, the changes that required surrender, and the future that still holds purpose for your life. Now I am asking you to do something with everything you have heard. Do not return to the same fearful posture from which you came. Do not gather these words into your heart only to walk back into the same prison of anxiety, self-doubt, control, and hesitation. This is the moment to rise differently. You do not have to become fearless before you move forward. You only need to stop allowing fear to make every decision for you. Courage is not the absence of trembling. Sometimes courage is choosing to take the next step while your hands still shake. You have spent enough time waiting to feel completely ready. There may never be a moment when every question disappears, every risk is removed, and every detail becomes clear. If you require perfect certainty before you move, you will remain standing in places I have already asked you to leave. Trust does not demand that you understand the entire road. Trust asks whether you believe I will remain with you on the part of the road you cannot yet see. My child, I have never asked you to carry tomorrow all at once. I am asking you to walk with me today. Take the next faithful step. Speak the truth you know you need to speak. Protect the peace you have learned to value. Refuse to return to patterns that once kept you bound. Stop reopening doors simply because loneliness makes the past look familiar. Stop shrinking yourself to fit places that required you to abandon your voice. Stop believing you need someone else's permission to become the person I have been forming within you. You are allowed to move forward. You are allowed to outgrow what once held you. You are allowed to live without constantly apologizing for choosing what is healthy, peaceful, and honest. The chains that held you were not always visible. Some were made of fear, some were made of shame, some were made of the need to please everyone. Some were made of the belief that you had to control every outcome in order to be safe. Some were made of memories that kept telling you that what happened before would certainly happen again. But you do not have to keep wearing what I have been teaching you to release. Freedom begins when you stop agreeing with the voices that kept you bound. When fear says, "You cannot do this," you can remember that you have already survived what once seemed impossible. When shame says, "You are still the person you used to be," you can remember that growth has changed the way you see, choose, and respond. When anxiety says, "Everything depends on you," you can answer by releasing what was never yours to control. When rejection says, "You will always be alone," you can remember that your worth does not rise and fall according to who stays. You do not need to fight every thought with panic. You can learn to recognize what is true and let everything else lose its authority. I want peace to become something deeper than a temporary feeling. Peace is not the promise that nothing difficult will ever happen again. Peace is the knowledge that difficulty does not have to take possession of your heart. You can face uncertainty without surrendering yourself to it. You can receive unexpected news without immediately imagining the worst possible ending. You can enter a difficult conversation without carrying responsibility for every person's reaction. You can make wise plans without worshiping control. You can care deeply without becoming consumed. You can love people without allowing their instability to dictate the condition of your soul. This is the freedom I want you to begin living from. You have spent years reacting to life from wounds, but now you are learning to respond from wisdom. That change may feel quiet, but it is powerful. There was a time when fear would have made you chase what was leaving. Now you can pause. There was a time when rejection would have made you question your worth. Now you can grieve without destroying yourself. There was a time when uncertainty would have pushed you into frantic decisions. Now you can wait long enough to hear clearly. There was a time when someone else's disappointment could make you abandon your boundaries. Now you can remain compassionate without betraying what you know is right. This is what growth looks like when it becomes part of your daily life. My beloved, stop measuring your strength only by how much you can carry. Sometimes strength is putting something down. Sometimes strength is admitting that you need help. Sometimes strength is saying no without anger and yes without fear. Sometimes strength is choosing rest when your old habits tell you that your worth depends on constant productivity. Sometimes strength is walking away quietly rather than staying to prove a point. Sometimes strength is forgiving while still remembering the wisdom the experience taught you. And sometimes strength is simply waking up and choosing again to trust me with what you cannot solve. You do not need to force your future into existence. You do not need to hustle your way into every blessing, manipulate every outcome, or exhaust yourself trying to make people recognize what I placed within you. There are doors that human effort cannot open, connections you cannot manufacture, and moments you cannot rush. Your responsibility is not to control everything that comes next. Your responsibility is to remain faithful in the place where your feet are standing. Keep your heart honest. Keep your motives clean. Keep learning. Keep choosing what produces peace instead of chaos. Keep walking away from what repeatedly pulls you back into fear. Keep making room for me to guide you without demanding that I reveal every detail at once. The future does not require a perfect version of you. It requires a willing one. You may still have moments of doubt. You may still feel tired. You may still encounter days when old fears return and try to speak with familiar authority. Do not interpret those moments as proof that nothing changed. Growth does not mean you never hear the old voice again. Growth means you no longer have to obey it. You can notice fear without becoming fear. You can remember pain without living inside it. You can feel uncertainty without giving uncertainty the final word. Every time you choose trust over panic, truth over shame, wisdom over impulse, and peace over the need to control, you are walking in the freedom that has been forming within you. So lift your head, my child. Do not look at the horizon as though danger is the only thing waiting there. There is possibility ahead. There is still joy ahead. There are relationships in which you will not have to disappear to be loved. There are moments when you will laugh without forcing it. There are mornings when peace will feel natural rather than unfamiliar. There are opportunities that will require courage, but they will also reveal how much you have grown. Walk toward them without needing to prove anything to anyone. This next chapter is not about showing the people who doubted you that they were wrong. It is not about revenge, competition, or finally receiving enough recognition to silence every critic. It is about becoming free enough that their opinions no longer control your direction. Let your life become evidence of grace, not a performance designed to win approval. Let your peace speak louder than your need to explain yourself. Let your integrity matter more than applause, and above everything else, stay close to me. Do not make the blessing more important than my presence. Do not make the future more important than the one who walks with you into it. What you have always needed most is not perfect circumstances, but the assurance that you are not alone within them. I am with you when the door opens and when it closes. I am with you when you feel confident and when you feel uncertain. I am with you in celebration and in quiet rebuilding. I am with you in every new beginning. You are seen. You are forgiven. You are loved. You are not abandoned. You are not trapped by who you used to be. You do not belong to fear. You do not belong to shame. You are mine. So rise, not because every problem has disappeared, but because you no longer have to face your life as the person who believed they were carrying it alone. Open your hands, release the need to control what comes next. Walk forward with courage, with wisdom, with peace, and with trust. Let the past remain a teacher instead of a prison. Let the future remain in my hands instead of becoming another burden on your shoulders. And let this truth remain with you wherever the road leads. You are deeply loved, completely known, and never beyond the reach of my presence.